Welcome to Spooky Times with Eric D, and tonight we are going to kick it old school, spookaroos. How old school? I am talking more than 5,000 years ago. We are going to be getting tips and tricks from the pros. We are going to be learning from ancient Babylonian and Assyrian, Mesopotamian, Ghostbusters, and Exorcist on tonight's Spooky Times with Eric D. And that's me. I'm your Eric D. Before we begin, of course, I want to remind you to check out the show's website. That is spookyasshit.com or spookyas.com. They both take you to the same place, and that place is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to almost each and every episode, including the ones that may no longer be streaming on your favorite podcasting service. You might think we just have, about 100 episodes. That's not true. We have almost 200 episodes now. And speaking of course, I'm going to remind you again, when you check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/spookytimes with Eric D, you will also be able to find a link to our secret closed group on Facebook, the Spookaroos. Now, everyone who listens, frequently is a Spookaroo. However, the true blue Spookaroos join the Spookaroo Facebook page. And that's where I'm going to be posting a phone number that you can call and share your favorite memories of the show, your favorite episode, and just tell me something you really enjoyed about the show, and we will use these recorded conversations on episode 199 as we look back to move forward and celebrate our 200th episode. Don't forget to find us on Instagram. We are at SpookyAssShit, and I already told you about the Facebook, so that means we are good to go. Let's talk about our Mesopotamian Ghostbusters and Exorcists. I'm always, looking for interesting topics for the show and, doing internet searches and stuff like that. And in this process, I came across some videos from the British Museum by a curator at the British Museum named Irving Finkel. And he is a curator in the Middle East department, ancient Middle East. And he has a lot of interesting videos through the British Museum and also separately. And a lot of them have to deal with ghosts and demons and the ways that the ancient Mesopotamians would deal with these kinds of issues. So a lot of the information we're going to be discussing tonight comes from these videos and from Irving Finkel. However, there is a slight problem with that I will get into as we go through here. But what are we talking about? Mesopotamia is roughly the area we know as Iraq today, and the Mesopotamian religion that we're going to be discussing tonight was around from about 5,500 BC to about 3,000 years ago, and it covers different cultures, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, and later on the Assyrians. And to understand their outlook on ghosts and demons, we kind of have to understand their culture. But one thing that curator Finkel points out, and which I even noticed before he talked about it, as he was going through and explaining what these ancient tablets written in cuneiform said, is that a lot of their beliefs, the particulars might be different, but the basic ideas are very much the same. So a skeptical person would say, well, that just goes to show that mankind tends to think up the same kind of stories and same kind of rationalizations and explanations for things. And I think a true believer would say, well, this goes to show that these things have always been around. This is not a new discovery, the other world, the upside down, things that go bump in the night. These things have always been with us. So I leave it to you to decide which team you're on. But anyway, back in these days, one thing that must be understood is that just everybody believed in ghosts and demons. This was not a challenged belief. It was just the way things worked. They didn't have more scientific explanations for a lot of things. And so, superstition reigned supreme, religion reigned supreme, and there were these beliefs that just everybody had, and there was nobody sitting around saying, well, this can't possibly be true. It's got to be germs that make you sick or something, because they didn't have germ theory. They didn't even have germ theory, let alone, any kind of proof of germs back in these days. And they had multiple gods, and their gods were based on the people at the time. So this is rather like the Greeks. Greeks had gods, but they weren't entirely all good or all evil. And it was the same with these Mesopotamian gods. But they did have a system in place where when you were born, you were assigned a protective god. And this is, if you're Catholic, kind of like a patron saint. But there is a difference. If you are Catholic and you have a patron saint, that's supposed to be the saint that kind of looks out for you, and it's supposed to be the saint that you pray to, especially, and they, intervene on your behalf with the Lord and try to get, nice things to happen for you. And they only ever do nice things. They're not into punishment and that kind of thing. But in the Mesopotamian religion, it's not so much that they would purposely do bad things to you. It's just that, like we said, they were kind of based on the culture of the time. And unlike the Catholic ideals where saints and the Lord and, Mother Mary and these kinds of figures are kind of morally above the human level. So they're never acting maliciously or lazily or lackadaisically in any kind of way. They are just, they will either help you or not help you, but again, not maliciously. But in Mesopotamia, it was believed that sometimes, your god might be derelict in his duties for one reason or another, or her duties. And it could be that they are, off somewhere else. They're not paying attention to you at that particular moment. They're not there at your beck and call every moment of every day. And this could be bad news because there were lots of bad things in the invisible world that were just waiting for their chance to pounce on you. And in this way, this time when your protector god was not paying attention, this is where a demon or a ghost or other kind of evil spirit may cause trouble. And the kind of trouble they cause, we didn't really get like poltergeist stories where like furniture was being thrown through the air and that kind of thing. We don't have any evidence of that. But it was clear from the tablets that they have left behind that they believed that demons and evil spirits could enter your body, and generally what they would do is make you feel very ill. So something like a headache, or not just a headache, but like a migraine, would be blamed on perhaps evil spirits or a demon entering your body. And there were differences between demons and ghosts and the kind of trouble they caused, just as, true believers say today. Although, well, again, depending on which kind of true believer you are, because, of course, if you are a Christian, you are not supposed to believe in ghosts. You are supposed to believe that ghosts are actually a demon in disguise trying to trick you. Go back and listen to our Ghost in the Bible episode if you want to learn more about that. I don't believe in ghost or the Bible, but still very interesting learning. But if you lived in Mesopotamia and you wanted to get rid of the thing that was causing you trouble, being a demon or a spirit, of course a demon is, for those of you new here, a demon is a being that was never ever human. It was created before man and existed in some form way longer and perhaps eternally, as opposed to a spirit or a ghost, which was formerly a human, and then that person passed away, and now their spirit form roams the earth for one reason or another. So if you wanted to get rid of either one of these things, it was important that you knew exactly what you were dealing with. Were you dealing with a demon or were you dealing with a ghost? And in either case, it was important for you to know or at least learn certain things about the particular ghost or demon that you were dealing with, because you needed to know how to get rid of these things. And just as is often the case now, the people of Mesopotamia believed that a ghost, for example, had some kind of unfinished business. here on Earth, and that they needed something to be done before they could return to their rest in the grave. So let's talk about ghosts first. When a person died in ancient Mesopotamia, they were buried in the ground with certain rituals designed to ensure that they would not rise from their grave and cause trouble. And to that end, the people of Mesopotamia had a certain kind of ceremony that they performed, much like a modern-day funeral. Although I'm sure there are some cultures in the world, but I don't think at any funerals that I've been at there have been any kind of incantations to make sure that the spirit stays in the ground. Although I suppose the saying "rest in peace" is perhaps a form of that. So maybe we're not so different after all. Anyway, you would bury the person, and you would bury certain of their favorite items with them. This was not just for memory's sake or for sentimental reasons, but also as a bit of a way of keeping them in their grave, keeping them in the underworld. Hey, we're sending some of your favorite things with you, so you don't have to come back for them. They're coming with you. And you would say this. This is a certain thing that you would say. You are the offspring of the wind. I have lain you in the grave. I have sent you down. Why would you not fear my solemn oath? So basically, you're saying, hey, I'm doing this. I'm sending you into the ground, and I'm swearing this oath. So you'd better heed it, because if you rise from the grave, you are breaking this oath that I made, and then we're gonna have some beef, yo. Now that's all very well and good, and would work perhaps on a normal situation where there was a proper burial. But what if the person was not given a proper burial? Say that they died in battle and their body was unable to be recovered, or they were lost at sea, or they burned in a fire or something like this. In that case, the Mesopotamians believed that this might very well cause the spirit to not be able to rest in peace, and so they would return to trouble the living. So again, another belief very similar to ours, that these spirits were not given a proper burial. How many times have we seen that in the movies or whatever? It's like, oh, you gotta, put their bones to rest, their remains to rest, and then they won't trouble us anymore. So again, these are beliefs that we've had for a very long time. Now, as I said, the ancient Mesopotamian culture was one that believed in ghosts, but they also weren't generally particularly afraid of them. People believed that ghosts hung around because they needed help. So there was this whole magical discipline, a whole school of magic devoted to appeasing ghosts and sending them off into the afterlife properly. Tablets still exist, written by ancient Ghostbusters, explaining several ways you might rid yourself of ghosts, depending on the needs of that ghost. There is a tablet that still exists, and it's part of the collection of the British Museum. So in those videos I was talking about, Irving Finkel gives us a very interesting story behind one of these tablets. Actually, again, I said there was kind of a problem earlier. Here's where it comes in, because he actually gives us two similar but different enough stories about the same tablet in two different videos. So I don't know which one is true. Believe it or not, I am not an ancient Mesopotamian scholar, so I can't read the tablet myself and tell you exactly what's going on here. But I will just tell you both versions of what Mr. Finkel gives us. And also, by the way, I should point out, although a slight criticism there where I'm saying that he gives us two different stories as to what the tablet means. Now, I don't know why this is. It could be because he's learned some new information which changed the meaning of the tablet, or, a new discovery, or maybe part of the tablet has been found that was not previously found, and so the story has changed. Any number of reasons. He doesn't explain why the story has changed, but hopefully, I did comment on the video, and hopefully we'll get a response, but nothing yet. But otherwise, I would say his videos are excellent, and I highly recommend you check them out. And also, I want to point out that he actually looks exactly the way you want someone who is into this kind of thing to look. which is to say he both looks and sounds a bit like Dumbledore from Harry Potter. And speaking of Harry Potter, he's got another whole video about the chess set, his chess set. Well, maybe not his exactly, but the chess set that he is in charge of that they use in one of the Harry Potter movies. Okay, anyway, let me tell you about this interesting tablet with two different stories as to what it actually means. So here's the first story that he tells. He says that it appears that a family had been troubled by the ghost of an older woman. The family called in an exorcist, and the exorcist decides that, what this ghost lady needs was a young male lover. And the tablet depicts the female ghost with her young, muscular, bearded lover, whom she leads around with a rope tied around his wrists. The tablet explains that clay figures should be made of both the lady ghost and her male lover, and that these clay figures must be buried with some ceremony at dawn, and this will cause the ghost to sink like their wax figures, clay figures that is, happily back into the earth, and she will be there with her new boy toy where she will be far too distracted to return to the land of the living and cause anybody any trouble again. So that's a nice story, lovely story, interesting story. But in another video showing the same tablet, he gives us a different interpretation. He says this time that actually the man depicted in the carving is actually the ghost. And he says he's not a young man, he says he's an old bearded man. And he is being led around by ropes, but that's because this was a particularly nasty man during his life, and that this lady that has been carved in is now, she's rather large and in charge, this lady, and so she will have the power to pull him back down into the underworld with the ropes tied around his wrist. So, I don't know which story is correct, but those are the two similar but very different stories of this particular tablet. Either way, as far as I know, whichever figure is which, as far as I know, this is the oldest depiction of a ghost that we have on record to date. So being haunted by a ghost like this, they could be annoying, but essentially the ghosts were harmless. Professor, I don't know. I keep wanting to call him either professor or doctor, and I'm sure he's got some kind of title, but I don't know because they don't say it in the video. So we'll say Curator Finkel. He says that it was rather like having a mouse in your house. It may startle you, and different people may have stronger reactions than others, but on the whole, it was not considered a very serious problem. But not all spirits were as harmless. Spirits, after all, are said to come from people, and there are all kinds of people out in the world. There are very happy, loving people, and there are some people who find it their job for some reason to go around and make life miserable for others around them. So why should they not continue to do so after death? If you were a dick in life, you can be a dick in the afterlife. So this is where things could become a very serious problem. A malicious spirit could enter a person's body through their ears, it was believed, and thus they would cause the migraines we spoke about earlier, or loss of sleep, or even, in extreme cases, madness. The only way you could heal these conditions was to draw the unfriendly spirit out of the living person. There are more tablets in the British Museum which explain how an exorcist might help the afflicted person. There's one tablet in particular that depicts a king sitting on his throne, and this tablet is inscribed with the name Abeknamaya. Historically, we don't actually know anything about this king because this tablet is the only piece of evidence we have to his existence. But we can gather that to the ancient Babylonians, he must have been seen as a great and wise mystic. And this is why he would be called upon to help you get rid of your evil spirits. Now, the tablet also depicts the court vizier shown squatting on top of a pole next to the king, with his arms extended out and his hands kind of raised up. The tablet instructs that the exorcist is to create clay figures in the form of both the king and his vizier, and these figures would be placed on a pillow near the head of the haunted person as they lay in bed. Since the king was so wise and powerful, most wayward spirits would not dare to go near him. But, just in case you were dealing with an especially brave spirit, the figure of the vizier was moved around on his pole so that he could kind of block spirits that may attempt to get to the king. So you basically had two levels of protection between the world and you, the invisible world, and the living person. Now, of course, such ceremonies were not performed for free. These were professional Ghostbusters and Exorcists, just like calling in a medium or something like that today. Most of the time, these people do not work for free. And something else that is interesting is that, when you look back in time, the common people did not have time or money for such activities. So this was nobility who would be going to such great lengths to rid themselves of ghosts. If a common person was to see a ghost, they probably just kind of shrugged it off and said, yeah, we got to deal with a ghost. Okay. They didn't have time to hire these people to come in and craft these dolls and then sit with the haunted person and make sure the dolls were in just the right kind of position. It's a lot today, like, with all this new age kind of stuff, like, oh, I can sell you these crystals, but they got to be in the right place. Or the mediums who come in and, oh, I can talk to spirits, but it's got to be under these certain circumstances. And so, the more things change, the more they stay the same in some ways. Dr. Finkel, Professor Finkel, Curator Finkel, he says that these are basically, being haunted or possessed. This is a disease of the rich. So these are things that only a rich person could afford to have taken out of their lives if it were to become an issue. Cheaper options did exist, however, and this included making charms, amulets, or clay figures in a more simplified way that could be buried in certain spots on your property to ward off ghosts or demons. They also made little amulets that you could wear around your neck. And if you could read the cuneiform, Professor Curator Finkel tells us basically that they say things like, leave me alone. Like you just have an amulet that would say something like that. And if that didn't work, there are further options that you can explore. So we have, surviving again on one of these clay tablets in the British Museum, we have a description of what to do in case you have tried the amulets and you've tried burying the clay figures and none of that stuff has worked. So what do you do in that case? Well, then you have to perform a ritual. And the ritual is as follows. You open a pit towards the setting sun with a bronze spade. You cast ditch water and a type of roasted grain flour into an ox horn. Then you char this over the fire and you stir that into the liquid. Then you recite this incantation with very proper grim voice, you would say. Dead persons, why do you keep appearing to me? You whose cities are ruin heaps and are mere bones. I will not go to Kutha, the ghost assembly point. You are conjured away by Queen Abutu, Queen Urgiskal, and Nishtinana, scribe of the gods, whose stylus is of lapis and carnelian. And we'll talk about exactly what that incantation means in just a moment. But anyway, after you recited this incantation, you would then cast that liquid into the well. Then you will pass a censer, which is like an incense burner. Like if you've, I don't know, again, sorry to keep talking about Catholic Mass, but that's the way I was raised. Those kind of bronze globe-shaped incense burners that they walk around with, and a torch. And you take this and you kind of like pass it over the afflicted person, and this will hopefully drive the evil spirit out. So let's talk a little bit about what that incantation means. Now, it's pretty straightforward, but what we have to remember is that we are talking about text from ancient times. So we don't want to just look at the words, we want to look at what we can infer from those words. So one of the things we can infer is that they believed, just like a lot of people now believe, that ghosts would hang around like ruins and abandoned kind of places. And also that, they came from bones and, dead people, obviously. So that, hasn't changed. Again, things remain the same. Also, it mentions the entrance to the afterlife, Kutha, and it mentions some of the goddesses of the underworld, and it also mentions their scribe. And basically, what you're saying when you say this incantation is, look, I've got the goddesses of the underworld on my side, and their scribe. So their scribe knows who is scheduled to be in the underworld and who is not scheduled yet to be in the underworld, who's still supposed to be among the living. So basically, I'm going to tell teacher if you start to mess with me and try to convince me to join you in the afterlife or to do, to walk down into the underworld with you or something like that. These ladies are going to be on top of it, and you're going to be in big trouble. Now, despite all these, incantations against spirits, there are those who wished to speak to the dead. There are those who wish to control these kind of spirits. And of course, today we call these people necromancers. People who wanted to put the dead into service for themselves. So, they also had their own kind of rituals. And again, we have texts that still exist explaining exactly what you would do. And of course, this reminds me of the story, again being raised Christian, Catholic, of the Witch of Endor, in which, they visit a witch and ask her to summon the spirit of a great king who will be able to tell the future, because these ancient Mesopotamians believed that a ghost or a dead person would have special knowledge from the underworld. Like they would kind of get like the inside tip on what's going to happen in the future. So you could bring these spirits forward and you could ask them either for advice because you thought they were an especially wise person in their life, or, ask them to try to predict the future with their special ghostly future knowledge. So if you wanted to do such a thing, then you would perform the following ritual. First, you need to get yourself a skull. Then you need to burn certain offerings to the dead. And unfortunately, this is where it gets a little tricky for us because we don't know what those offerings were. I'm not sure if the problem is that the tablet is unclear here or if it refers to things that we don't know what they're referring to because it's been lost in translation or because it was called something different 5,000 years ago, or if perhaps the tablet is damaged. He does not explain on the video why we don't know exactly what the certain things that we need are. So it is a little hard to follow this ritual, but you need to burn certain things, and then you need to anoint the skull. And if you're lucky, the sun god will awaken the requested spirit, and that spirit will possess the skull on your little makeshift altar. Then you can ask the skull yes or no questions, and the skull will chatter its teeth in response. Presumably 1 chomp for yes, or 2 chomps for no. That's what my chattering skull sounds like. Okay, so that's how you would handle either getting rid of a ghost or speaking to a ghost. But what if you were troubled by demons? Well, luckily for you, there are also texts from the time explaining how to get rid of demons. Very often, the magic involves speaking the name of the demon. But since demons were known to be deceitful, it was often very difficult to determine exactly which demon you were dealing with. So, the ancient exorcist invented a bit of a workaround to solve this problem. They would simply list the names of all known demons, and one of them, presumably, had to be the right one. So the evil demon spirit, would then leave the possessed person at that point. There was a problem, though. This didn't always seem to work. And when this failed to produce results, the exorcists theorized that they must have either accidentally forgotten to speak one of the known names, or perhaps they were doing battle with a demon whose name had not yet been discovered. But again, those crafty ancient exorcists invented a workaround. They still spoke the names of all the known demons, but once they had finished that list, they would also say, or any evil, thus encompassing all evil spirits, both named and unnamed. Well, this seemed to work much better, but a funny thing happened. After quite some time, these spells and incantations are passed down from teacher to pupil for generation to generation. Something became a little lost in translation again. Any evil spirit began to be recognized not just as a catch-all term for any unnamed demons, but as the actual name of a particular demon. So there is a clay tablet that exists that has instructions on how to create a clay figure of any evil. And this figure is to be used in magic ceremonies, the actual demon, any evil. There is a picture that depicts any evil, and he is shown wearing a long skirt and holding up two unknown items. Unfortunately, this tablet is rather damaged, so he's very difficult to make out, and we don't know what he's holding up aloft, and he doesn't look particularly beastie or anything like that, so he's rather mundane looking from what we can see, but still pretty cool that there is a demon named Any Evil. If simply naming the demons didn't work, the Exorcists did have various other methods of getting rid of demons depending on which type of demon was doing the possessing. And these methods included burning certain items and asking the possessed to inhale the smoke, or the possessed may have to wear a certain amulet wrapped around their finger for a certain number of days. And a lot of the cures had to do with these clay figures that we keep talking about. That was a big thing. Apparently, it was very difficult for spirits and demons to tell the difference between themselves and clay figures. And I'm sure there's more to that story, but I don't know the exact reason why that may be, or if they literally thought that this clay figure was some kind of form of themselves and they were being tricked, or if it was there's more to the explanation. I'm not 100% sure. But let me tell you about one demoness in particular and a couple ways that you could try to get rid of her. There's one demoness who is particularly famous in Mesopotamia, and this is Lamashtu, and she is a lion-headed female depicted holding two snakes aloft in each hand while suckling a wolf and her dog from her breast while riding on the back of a donkey. So that is meme culture 5,000 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. And she had it out for young children, babies, and pregnant women. Now, this is a very common type of demon that we see time and time again in cultures around the world. And the reason for this kind of demon should be pretty obvious. Up until very recently, and even into modern times, giving birth can be very dangerous. And babies and young children are frail. So there, especially in olden days, especially probably 5,000 years ago, there was a high likelihood that either the mother or the child, or both mother and child, were in grave danger of dying during childbirth or shortly thereafter. And this demon, Lamashtu, was the personification of fears around that kind of thing happening. And that's why we see this particular type of demon, even though we might call it by different names, but there always seems to be some kind of ghost or demon or monster in cultures around the world that will come for babies, children, and pregnant women. But anyway, in Mesopotamian culture, it was Lamashtu, and she was the one who would come around at night, and she would be looking for wayward children to attack, or if she couldn't find any, you could find her sniffing at the cracks of the bottom of the doorways to see if she could smell a baby in the house. And if she did smell a baby, she would try to sneak in and devour it. Now, this obviously was a very frightening demon to behold, and a very, very frightening demon to deal with, because, of course, she was after your children, the most precious thing in the world. But there is some good news. She had an arch enemy, and I think most of you will be familiar with our next demon that we're going to discuss, because his name is Pazuzu. Yes, Pazuzu from The Exorcist, but not the demon you know in The Exorcist. In fact, Curator Finkel has some things to say about the depiction of Pazuzu in The Exorcist, which we will talk about in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about Pazuzu. He is a demon, and he is the son of basically the god of evil in Mesopotamia, and he is represented by the southwestern wind, and he is the bearer of storm and drought. Now, he was an especially ugly and fearsome-looking demon. He had the body of a man, the head of either a lion or a dog, it's a little hard to tell, and the talons of an eagle for feet, and he had 2 pairs of wings, a scorpion's tail, and a serpentine penis. Now, he was a very powerful and very fearsome demon, and because of this, even other demons were afraid of him. Probably also because, his dad was, the man. So for this reason, despite being a demon, he was actually used by the ancient Mesopotamians as something of a protector. His head was often carved into amulets that could be worn for protection or hung up facing the window for the same reason, that, if another demon saw that Pazuzu was already with you or in your home or protecting you in some way, they would stay away because they'd say, I might be bad, I might be a big scary demon, but that guy is way scarier than me, and I don't want to get on his bad side. So he's already got that house covered. I'm just going to keep on moving to the next house. I'm not going to bother these people. And Lamashtu had this same kind of reaction to him. And if Lamashtu or other malicious spirits saw him, like I said, they would just kind of run away. Now, there's no surviving text explaining exactly how Lamashtu and Pazuzu became arch enemies, even though it's quite clear that they were. But our new friend, Curator Finkel, has a theory, and I think he was kind of half joking here when he said this, but he said, perhaps the two of them were married at some point, and it was a rather acrimonious divorce, and so they just can't stand the sight of each other, and that's why Lamashtu will just kind of move on and not want anything to do with Pazuzu. But I like my theory that it's because, he's this big, powerful demon, and he's kind of like the son of evil, and that's why, he's so badass that even, badass people, creatures, can't stand to be near him, because, he's just too intense. Now, in the movie The Exorcist, of course, if you pay attention to the beginning of the movie, which takes place in Iraq, they find the statue of Pazuzu, they find some amulets of Pazuzu, I believe, and this is the spirit that goes on to possess Regan, and we learn about him in the sequels and all this kind of stuff. But the truth of the matter is that, yes, he was a demon, and he did bring certain bad things with him, but in general, all in all, we have examples of him being used, like we said, in this protective mode. So he was actually, even though he was evil, a protector of sorts. So this depiction of him as being a demon that would possess a young child simply for using a Ouija board or, whatever the reasons may be, this doesn't quite square with the Pazuzu that we know from mythology or history. And in fact, Curator Finkel calls The Exorcist slander against Pazuzu. So just remember, Pazuzu, he's kind of not that bad. Not for living humans anyway. He's scary to demons, but if you get on his good side, hopefully he's there to help you out. So that is the end of our look at Mesopotamian demons and ghost busting and exorcism. I hope you have enjoyed. I will tell you again, please check out spookyas.com. Find links to all of our social media. Join the Spookaroo group on Facebook so that you can get that phone number and call in soon. It's not posted yet, but it will be, and briefly, so that you can call in and leave your message and be part of episode 199, our special celebration episode, before we move on to our big time episode number 200. We got some special plans for that one, special guests that we haven't heard from in a while. And please, as always, if you could subscribe, rate, and review the show, share it with your friends. It really helps. It's really encouraging to see when people write nice things about the show and let me know that they are listening and enjoying the show. So I hope you will do that. I'm also thinking about starting a Patreon for the show. But here's the thing, you guys. I have wonderful listeners and I appreciate each and every one of you. But let's not pretend that we're the biggest show out there in the world, And so I have to figure well, my audience isn't that large. And then the percentage of people who might be having a hard time right now is pretty big. The world has been through some craziness, to put it mildly, lately. And money might not be rolling in the way it once was. And so you might not be so inclined as to give something on Patreon. And then I'll start this Patreon and I won't get any donations and I'll feel really bad about myself and the work that I do, even though I understand that, maybe just people can't join in. So I don't know. I haven't decided whether I'm actually going to bite the bullet and start an actual Patreon yet, but you can write in and let me know. Of course, the email is spookyasshit@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram @spookyasshit. And of course, the website is spookyas.com, and you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookytimes with Eric D. And be looking for that number soon, and I will hope to hear from you, and I hope to make you part of episode 199 as we get close to our 200th episode. Until next time, don't be afraid.
Spooky Times is a Witchfinder production.